What's up, investors? Chase here from the Note MBA podcast. On this week's episode, we talk all about a major shift that has come to the real estate / nation. It's really interesting the way that this is shaping up. It's a really cool article, a really cool topic. We also talk about some new bankruptcy laws that are coming up in December. We talk about some other things happening in and around the industry, including, well, I don't want to spoil it, but how many people do you think in Q1 bought or did their first flip? Just one flip. How many people? We talk about it in today's show. Check it out right now.
The unexperienced, uneducated ones.
How else are they going to learn? Would be my immediate question to somebody.
My response would be, go work for a contractor. Go work for somebody.
Oh, yeah, great, says the 23-year-old dude who doesn't have 3 kids. And I mean, like,
okay, fair enough.
First, seconds, performing, non-performing? What the f***? Note buyers, when it seems like you're in this business alone, know Chase, Robert, and the rest of their tribe are at it every week. They're bringing updates from their own note businesses as they work to find, fund, and finish deals. Follow along as they share their grassroots education with you, tuition-free. If you'd like to know more about what they do and to download the entire back catalog, check out notemba.com. Now, here are your hosts, Chase Thompson and Robert Woods.
Hey, everybody, welcome to the Note MBA podcast, your home for note investing on iTunes. I'm Chase Thompson, joined this week by David Glinsky. Mr. Glinsky.
Hello.
Hello. What's going on, bud?
Not too much here, just working in the humid Florida heat. It is painful, but it's something to do.
Working on what? I mean, I see occasionally through Snaps, Instagrams, the Facebooks, and just, kind of all of the socials that you're constantly doing flip work, as well as obviously the note investing side and stuff. So what's up in the world of flips in Florida?
So one of my flips, I was changing a garage door opener on one of the things where the spring broke, so the garage can't open, and it was just hot as can possibly be in there, so that was painful. And then the other one was drywalling a patio ceiling, so that was also very hot and not fun. But the news there is that one of them, I know I keep saying it, but I'm like a week away from finishing it. My goal is to take pictures by the end of this week and get it listed. And then the other one, which probably needs a good 2 or 3, 4 weeks left of work, I'm going to outsource all of that to somebody so I can get back to the note stuff and focus on that.
Very nice. Well, not that I enjoy you sitting in just tumultuous, torturous heat, but I thought I would bring up a couple of different topics that kind of involved that flipping / repair side of what is involved in flipping, this idea of having to use contractors and stuff. So everything that we'll be talking about this week will actually be different news stories, different news articles, different types of content that have either been searched out by myself. People send us stuff all of the time to the inbox and share with us on Facebook and just different places. But this particular article, the title, I think, can all at once be viewed as a bit over the top and 100% accurate all at the same time. As you move through this article, it's incredibly well researched, a ton of statistics, and great storytelling throughout this article. It's a wonderful little piece. It's over on Bigger Pockets. We will have, like I said, links to all of the different kinds of things we'll be talking about today, as always, in the show notes at notemba.com there. But this particular, or in the show notes of your app of choice, I think that all of the show notes actually come up now, which is great. Huge updates coming to the podcast world through Apple. It's really great. But the title of this article is "The Major in all caps, Way a Shrinking, Aging, Skilled Labor Force Will Impact U.S. Real Estate." So essentially what he's saying is here's the biggest way that this shrinking, aging, skilled workforce, this idea that we talk about, people going off to college instead of going off to, say, a trade school or something like that, and how this has been part of, that zeitgeist conversation as the millennial generation has kind of come through, even like Gen X, Gen Y, this type of thing, where we're doing more of the thought work instead of the hammer swinging work, right? And he brings into this topic, this idea. First of all, his first paragraph is totally apocryphal, and he tells this story of the frog in a pot of room temperature water being brought to a boil, and the frog won't realize the change, and then it'll get boiled, and without even noticing. That is completely false, by the way. For anybody who would love to use this analogy of the frog in a boiling pot of water, as just a quick side note, that actual original experiment was done with lobotomized frogs to gauge, reaction after you have separated, I believe, the brain from the spot. Anyway, so as a point of reference, it's completely, it's not a myth per se. This experiment was done. However, the things that people use it for as a means for, giving their side or their angle or whatever is completely ridiculous. So, right off the top, I was not a fan. I was like, oh, this is not even, blah, whatever. But then you get into the meat of it, and it's pretty fantastic. Like I said, a ton of stats, a ton of research kind of went into this. He even mentions that, where he started, kind of blue collar. His dad, he was swinging the hammer, how he got involved in real estate. He was a base level handyman, and how he worked his way up to become a small local investor, and has just built a construction company on top of that, which then started buying distressed real estate, which then renovated and maintained. It's a great bit. It's a great story, right? Like, I love it. But what he brings to this story is this idea of this aging, older tradesman workforce, and how there's not a lot of younger skilled trade workers following up in the ranks. In fact, I think the stat in here is 53% of all skilled trade workers were over the age of 45 in 2012. So clearly that number has only more than likely increased, right? I don't know by how many, percentage points, but presumably. On top of that, he brings into, account some of the more recent, I will say, political talk regarding, say, a lot of us know that some of those skilled workers, the bricklayers, the construction laborers, the drywallers, they're not all, 45-year-old Americans that are doing these jobs, right? So born and raised kind of individuals, right? You and I both know this. In fact, I would assume anyone listening to the sound of my voice right now knows that, right?
Fair, yeah.
You don't just have to live in South Texas to know that, right? So, or Southern Florida or wherever, this is a fact. And so he actually brings into the topic, the political environment of, I'm not saying we're building a wall. I'm not saying immigrants. I'm not giving a position. I'm saying he takes a very soft position on how hard that, demographics potentially being hit right now. And it's actually, if you do any sort of research, or I listen to a ton of NPR, and they've actually had a few articles about what it is doing to the agricultural trade skill and market and all that kind of stuff. So we're about to see two very large, if you were to read this article, see what's coming out of the agricultural business and what have you, we're about to see some large issues / shifts in how things are going to look, and the landscape is going to be different, correct? And he brings into this idea what this ripple effect could possibly do of this aged skill worker trade not having this huge gap, right? What's it going to do? And he says, do you own real estate? Do you rent real estate? Do you buy goods and services? Do you have anything to do at all with the economy? This is going to affect you. And his, after all of this data, all of this talk, all this research, he basically says the results will be twofold. The housing added to the inventory will be more expensive or too expensive for entry-level buyers to come up with a down payment, because what it took to build it will now cost more because we have less skilled workers to then do the job, so they can be more selective, so they have to pay. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And rental property owners like yourself, potentially myself, a lot of the listeners, will have to pay more for increased prices in the labor cost of maintenance and upkeep of their properties. They in turn will pass this on to renters, who will then have higher rent, who then won't be able to afford the rent, and then we're in this really weird space. And it's a never-ending cycle that drives up rent, which drives up demand, which drives up property value, which drives up rent, which drives up demand,
until pop.
Right. It's a wonderful well-researched, just a fantastic piece on something that a lot of people are talking about. He even has a, so what do we do about it section. What I love is this sentence here. He says, I pile a lot of stats and information into these articles, and I really do put a lot of work and thought into them. But the truth is that the economy is too complex for any one man or woman to predict. Nonetheless, even if without a crystal ball, you can clearly and easily see an undeniable trend for a major shift on the horizon in terms of labor costs, specifically related to housing. So it's just a really great article, and it got me thinking as I'm watching you on Snapchat doing your own, drywall work and all this other stuff, which is great. I have no problem with it. But this idea and this concept that a lot of people really are not putting a ton of thought into, a ton of resources behind the logic of, and how almost demonizing some of these trade job titles have become, right? And what can be done about it? What is there anything that we can do about it? And how do we address this?
I mean, I think that all starts, educating the younger crowd, like just kids in high school and stuff. And, the fact that high schools took away like shop class and all of those different types of vocational electives, just that type of stuff is leading the kids away from learning trade jobs and doing that kind of stuff. And don't get me wrong, I'm all for higher education and having people do better jobs, but we still need people to do the trade jobs. You could just look at the trucking industry. There's a huge shortage of that, and that's going to create some serious ripples soon enough, like what you're saying.
Yes, completely. And I think that there is this notion, especially even, amongst some of these younger aged high schoolers, what have you, that I've seen, that this idea that I have to go work here, or that I have to go do this, or I have to go do that. There's a top comment by a guy named Gary here. And he says, Jared, spot on piece. I see this every day in my market. He's in Chicago. I'm a buy and hold landlord. I stopped doing flips because the junkers, labor, and materials are going through the roof. Both my main rental maintenance guys and contractors are in their early 60s, and they never went to college. They probably make over $100,000 a year, but they bust their tails. They can't keep up. So he goes on, and we're going to talk about this here, but he essentially has nailed it. These guys are getting older. They're making great money, but they're busting their butts, and they can't keep up. They can't keep up for numerous reasons: age and opportunity. Like, the amount of work that they possibly could do is much more than they can do, even if they were, working 18-hour days and 20 years old. So then he goes on to say they pay double minimum wage for unskilled labor. The issue is not really people going to college. About half of high school students go to college. Less than 40% graduate. The non-college kids have zero skills, zero work ethic, and zero opportunities. He's aggressive there. I don't 100% agree, because clearly there are opportunities in this whole article we're just talking about, but whatever. There is a huge mismatch between skills and opportunities. This is the largest issue facing the nation. If we could fix this, we could put another 5 to 10 million people to work, plus create wealth. There are junker houses that need to be rehabbed, and there's no one around to rehab them. Then he doesn't take a shot here per se, but kind of. He says, for all the geniuses here on BP saying that you should get 3 contractor estimates, gimp them down to your contractors. I think he means basically talk them down, from their price, etc. You need to spend some time in the real world. You have to treat your contractors right, pay them on time, and be fair. There are a dozen other investors that want to hire them.
Yep, that's true. And I'm pretty sure I can attest to that. And it's a really real struggle with trying to balance what can I do myself and save the money, and what should I outsource? And I'm finally getting to the point where I'm so sick of doing the work because I'm waking up sore and hurt and just frustrated that I'm going to outsource most of the work, but I have to swallow the pill that comes with that of knowing that my margins are going to be significantly cut, because nowadays, like what the article said, labor is just through the roof, man. I remember specifically maybe 2 or 3 months ago, I got all the popcorn texture off the ceiling, and I just wanted somebody to come in and put knockdown texture. And they wanted to charge me like $4,000 for a 1,700 square foot house. While it was a lot of work, it took me a whole day to do it. I spent all of like $200. That's exaggerating, on materials.
Oh, are you talking about like just scraping popcorn ceilings?
Well, I scraped the popcorn ceilings. I just wanted somebody to come in and put the new knockdown texture. Oh, you mean like
respray the texture? I got you.
Yeah, so like a nicer, newer texture.
Yeah.
And they wanted like $4,000 for that, and they were absolutely serious. They're like, okay, we'll do it for $3,500. And just like, are you kidding? It's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, 1,700 square feet, and maybe somebody can correct me and bring me up to realistic standards, but I feel like that was way too much for something I did in a day with $200 of materials. You know,
is the house ready for that kind of work? What I mean is that if someone was gonna come into my house to do that, like between carpet that's not going to get replaced, I obviously am fully stocked in the house. We get the beds, we get all of the, having to lay down everything. Is this a house ready for that kind of work, or is this a house that would need to have been prepped?
Fair. That's a fair enough point, but it was a completely vacant house.
That's my point, right? Like, so that's what I'm asking. That's my point, right?
Yeah. So it was ready. The prep was barely anything, maybe put some sheets of plastic on the walls.
Interesting. I love it. I would love to hear feedback on this topic. And as many people as can. Obviously, all the links, like I said, will be in the show notes and all that kind of stuff. I think it's a fascinating topic. I think he brought a lot of really great ideas to it. One guy mentioned that yes, this is a big issue, but bigger issues will be something like automation. I totally agree. There's no, I'm not picking sides on what's going to be a bigger or worse or major or more major or minor or whatever. There's a lot coming down the pipe. And this is one of those things that I think is going to sneak up on even some of the smartest of people. Just flat out sneak up on them because it isn't sexy. It's people that do drywall. It's trade skill stuff. It's this kind of, it's not automation and robotics and I think it's something that's going to become a huge issue. I also have my takes on how different, programs and support systems, but that's not necessarily in the scope of this show. I just thought it was a fascinating take for me, for us, for people that listen to the show that are out there, having potential rehabs done, working on their flips, doing stuff like that. I think it is infinitely fascinating. Another thing I wanted to bring up regarding flips, again, we'll link it up. This is from Realty Track. They have a newsletter that comes out. We've had Darren Bloomquist on the show before. He got everybody kind of a free inside pass on how to get that newsletter from his from his company. At the time, it was Realty Track, but I actually think Realty Track sends it out still, but they either got acquired or something. Anyway, it's Atom Data, so ATTOM data.com is I think now the parent company perhaps, or subsidiary. Anyway, long story short, it's a realty.com newsletter. But if you have not already jumped on that, it's because you missed the Darren Bloomquist episode. So I'd highly recommend you go back and snag that, listen to that episode, get the free newsletter from them because it is tremendous. And you can actually find that episode at notomia.com/Darren.Bloomquist. I believe it's also episode 55. So go check that out if you have not already, because the next story is going to come from that piece, from that wonderful little Realty Track newsletter that just came out. And this was the home flipping pyramid. And I thought this was fascinating. So what this is it's like a little one-pager. I don't really think there's much more data on it than this. And it's like the 14th page, and it's just kind of like a small little thing that I thought was interesting. But and this is Q1 only, of the 44,000 home flips in Q1 in 2017, 44,000 home flips in just Q1 of 2017.
This is nationwide?
Yeah, I would hope so. Yes, nationwide. That's a tremendous amount of home flips. 69%, almost 70%, 69% were mom and pop flippers only doing a single flip. More than
Wow.
2/3 of the single family home and condo flips in Q1 were investors who completed just one flip during that quarter. Mom and pop flippers. They tended to pay everything up.
I wonder how much of that was influenced by HGTV.
Oh, it's got to be all of it, right? Like all of it, right? Like so here's what you got. You've got these. So it says, and those mom and pop investors tended to pay more upfront. So they paid more upfront, right? Because obviously, if they're not savvy enough yet and all that kind of stuff, and they take longer to complete the flip because of course they do. They don't have the crews. Plus, they have an aging workforce that we just talked about. Contractor doesn't want to work with them. They've never done this before. You know, all kinds of stuff might be going on there, right? Compared to large investors is what they're referring to. Mom and pop investors were also more likely to finance the home purchase of a flip compared to large investors. So, of all of these numbers, you have 70%, 69 at one flip. 20% of that is mid-tier flippers, 2 to 9. Is this where you're sitting in Q1, right? You're sitting there. So, if you're looking at these numbers, there's only 11% are doing 10 plus flips in Q1. Now, they are saying that these stats are just from the first quarter. So this isn't referring to just this year. This is saying doing 10 plus flips in a quarter. So that is, that's a pretty, you got a solid business. You're working. But yeah, this is just a tremendous little insight and look into the numbers. And what's really cool, and we see this time and again when it comes to the note space, you've got your mom and pop flippers, the one-off guy, average purchase price, you ready for this? $208.
Wow.
Average time to complete the flip, 194 days. So 208, 208,000, 194 days. That is tremendous.
That is. That's over 6 months. Wow.
That's crazy. Now, moving forward, the mid-tier flipper, 187. Already, we've gone from 208 to 187.
Wow.
So we've seen a decrease in roughly
$21,000,
$22,000 less and 158 days. So almost 40 days less, almost a full month.
Wow.
And then we have our top tier flippers, the pros. They're picking these up at 153,000 compared to the 208.
I was going to say, I'm going to bet that they're doing even like significantly better than the other two tiers.
It's not even close. It's not even close. And the average days of completing the flip is 138, down from 194 from the top guys.
Impressive. Imagine 10 flips each. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah, that's bananas. And not even to include the fact that obviously if you're doing 10 plus of those, right, you're clearly financed or have investors or whatever the case may be. If you're sitting at just 10, you're at 1.5 million in average purchase price. That doesn't include paying and contract and all of the other stuff that comes that you and I both know comes with flips. So it's a whole different ballpark for sure. But that's still crazy. The number of new people still getting into the game in 2017. It's crazy. Now, these aren't necessarily new people. These could definitely be previous flippers for sure, but they're paying more and they're taking longer. So they can't have a ton of experience, in my opinion.
Right. And so here's a controversial sort of, I guess, opinion or topic. How do you feel, and we can relate this to the note space after I say this, but how do you feel about the one-off mom and pop flippers? Is it good or bad for the business? Because I've heard, and I feel sometimes that it is bad because these people are coming in here not knowing what they're doing, driving up the prices for everybody else, occasionally messing up and just getting underwater on these houses. And it's just a bad time, not for them, but for all the other investors and flippers that are out there, because that's one less, house that somebody else could have flipped and made some money on, or they're just eating up all the margins and making the neighborhoods worse.
Yeah, I think that there are some valid points to that logic. I think that you definitely can have a scenario where you know, you and I could have a conversation and you could make an argument that there's all these points to be made, right? But like, look, not everyone's going to have access to this 1.5 million to go pick up 10 properties, right? In Q1. And if they did, and that was their first deal, they're going to fuck up all 10. So like,
so I think my point was more towards the just the people that come off from the shows. Like you said, like most of them probably influenced from like a TV show or a friend that they know. So it just, the unexperienced, uneducated ones.
How else are they going to learn would be my immediate question to somebody.
My response would be, go work for a contractor, go work for somebody.
Oh, yeah, great, says the 23-year-old dude who doesn't have 3 kids. And I mean, like,
fair enough.
My pendulum's going to swing totally the other direction because I'm going to go work for that. And we just got talking about having unskilled. Listen, do you want Chase Thompson doing your drywall? I'm going to put it to you like this. I have literally never even tried.
No.
So no, of course not. Now, there's a ton of other things that I could potentially do for somebody. But my point is these individuals that are either they're trying to maybe shore up a nest egg for themselves, or they're trying to make a transition out of a current life or whatever, right? Trying to do a career shift, whatever the case may be. Not everybody can just go work for somebody, right? Obviously. And yes, apprenticeship and all that stuff is very important. I think the problem is the salaciousness of where that information is coming from. If this were an HGTV show, we'd have been canceled back at episode 20. We talked about losing money too much. We talked about making mistakes too much. Like, the salaciousness didn't exist. So I think ultimately that's kind of part of the problem, is that the full holistic education, quote, and I'm using that incredibly loosely, obviously, that they're getting from these different places and shows and seminars and all of this kind of stuff is just not even close to enough.
Right.
It's not even close. So they get caught in a scenario where they might have overpaid a little for this material, or they didn't quite know what to pay a contractor here, or they picked up the house for too much, and they don't know what they don't know, which is something obviously we love to say here. And so they don't know how to just put the tourniquet on, stop the bleeding, and finish the deal. Maybe not, go gangbusters and make a ton of money, but learn without getting getting put under and that kind of stuff. So I think it comes back more to the salaciousness of where that information is coming from, and potentially the quote training that this individual is getting, which is why I think communities like Bigger Pockets, shows like ours, and different things like that are great places for people to find themselves, learn over time. If you're in a position to be an investor first, these types of things, right? But yeah, I ultimately, not to fire back at you too hard about not having kids in a while. It's tough, man. And it's tough for everybody, but they got to learn somehow.
Exactly. Yeah. Be it getting a job, be it podcast, be it YouTube, some sort of education should be had before diving in. And I think that's without saying, but that's just me kind of venting a little bit from seeing so much naivety happen in the flipping space. Like, man, I run into some houses that are just, the workmanship is so bad, or into some people that I see them working on the house and just doing things just so terribly wrong. And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to make myself out to be like, I know how to do everything in the house, because surely I don't. But, luckily I had my father to teach me most of everything. And it's just a shame when you see flips that aren't done in at least the minimum quality that they could get away with, No,
I definitely get what you're saying. And I agree completely. I mean, you're going to see it across, like I said, I think it's systemic across not just real estate, not just flips, not just notes, right? It's people don't know what they don't know. we, generally speaking, the people that are more likely to raise their hand and say, I don't know, when presented with a situation, any situation, is less than the other side. I'm not going to put a number on it. I'm just going to say it's less. I don't think it's 49-51, but I don't think enough people say, I don't know, and then go do the research or seek out an expert or whatever the case is. And then, of course, like I said, that from the training or what spurs you into it or whatever the case may be, I think that area is tough. I think that's a really interesting spot to have found yourself for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, man. Actually, I wanted to ask you something. How did the feedback come in from last week for the contest for Distressed Bro?
Oh, I got to get you the names. I don't have any of the emails pulled. I've got to get you the names. We won't give everybody one more week, but I'll give you one more before I give you all the data and everything like that. And we'll get you the name and we'll announce the winner. That's a great idea. I've got one more topic I want to discuss, but I'll interject in the middle of this because you were asking, and I did not have it at the ready because, of course, why would I? That would have been a good idea. So we are moving, like officially. We've been talking about it. All the things have fallen in place. We're signing and all that kind of stuff. We're officially signing docs on the house on Friday morning. Scheduled at title, all that kind of stuff, which is very exciting and all good. We're loading up the van, the U-Haul on Thursday night, taking the kids to parents' house to kind of stay the night so we can get everything loaded, all that kind of craziness, right? So it has just been next level hectic, both between the business and life perspective. So that is why my just slipped my mind. So we weren't even going to do a show this week, but that just isn't my style. So we're here anyway,
for the people,
and I'll have all of that for next time.
Absolutely.
So yeah, the last or kind of two more things I wanted to address. And again, linked up, show notes, yada, yada. This one is an interesting one. The title of the article is Winter is Coming, for those unfamiliar. This is a Game of Thrones reference, correct? Yeah, I feel totally, I've never even seen a minute of Game of Thrones. So I feel very, I'm pretty sure I know what that is though, as I'm fairly involved in meme culture, though not so much Game of Thrones culture.
I'm not gonna lie, I've actually never seen the show either. So
yeah, but that's where it's from,
yes,
right?
Correct. It is absolutely, that's where it's from.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very good, very good. So this is Winter is Coming. Supreme Court adopts new bankruptcy rules to take effect December 1st. So at first, when I pulled this up, I was thinking it was a little, we talk about salaciousness, but this is actually kind of interesting. So I highly recommend you go check this out. Definitely dive in, kind of figure out, but not in real estate flips or investing or anything like that. Is this more important than in our space, the note investing space? So article starts, finally, after several years of debate, major changes have been approved that will have a profound impact on consumer bankruptcy cases. So it talks about back in April 27th, the Supreme Court submitted to Congress amendments to the federal rules of bankruptcy procedures, which set forth these pretty significant changes dealing with not just the forms, but also the filing of these claims. So these proposed changes are not supposed to take effect until December 1st, 2017, but they should be pretty significant for creditors. And these are for bankruptcy cases 7, 12, and 13, and will require some crucial adjustments in terms of like conforming to the shortened timelines for people like us or creditors, in particular for Chapter 13 cases. So this is interesting for numerous reasons. So it goes on to actually mention where some of the bigger rule changes will be and things like that. So like the first one it mentions is Rule 2002, which is a notice to creditors. It's an amendment to this rule now requires that creditors are to be provided at least 21 days notice of the time fixed for filing an objection to confirmation of a Chapter 13 plan and be provided at least 28 days notice of the confirmation hearing of a Chapter 13 case. There's a lot going on there, but the important thing here is that neither of these notices or provisions existed prior to this rule proposed change. So it's not just that they're also changing existing stuff. It's that they've got an all new proposed changes as well. And the ones that are listed here are just some of the noteworthy ones, according to the guy that wrote this article. There's even more changes. He's got another rule on here, 3002, which is a filing of proof of claim, 3007, an objection to certain claims, 3012, which is a determining the amount of secured claims. Just a really interesting look into what is going to be coming down the pipe regarding bankruptcy, how bankruptcies are handled. And it looks like it will be across the board, obviously, regardless of where or what state or any of those kinds of things. And this is noteworthy for numerous different reasons. And some of them are potentially smaller than others, right? Obviously, a huge change if you're currently in a bankruptcy situation. Obviously, there's probably going to be like a grandfathering there. But one of the smaller things that might be adjusted by this is that a lot of higher end either hedge funds or banks or different places that we get deals, you, I, a lot of other note investors, they specialize, especially some of these funds, they go after Chapter 13 or likely to be Chapter 13 or these types of bankruptcy situations because there's a plan, there's a payment plan. So they've got a ton of capital behind them, and then they have a portfolio of deals presumably with payments coming, so it justifies the money and all that kind of stuff. Well, if you have these big proposed potential changes, that might change their strategy, which, is a trickle down. It changes then our strategy because what are they going to be willing to sell and how much are they willing to sell it for if they're taking a hit on one side or the other? Just a lot of different things and moving pieces coming forward. So that is interesting, looking forward to the business as it sits now and kind of moving forward. And then we've mentioned it a couple of times. But there's also been a ton of people talking about how there's going to be more homes coming on the market due to some readjustments and things like that. However, it's also worth noting, another article we'll be linking up, this one from Realtor Mag, underwater homeowners are drying up. So the appreciation that we're all seeing equity-based across the country, and it's depending on where you live, it's higher than it's going to be different, right? However, the population of underwater homeowners has dropped by nearly 1 million borrowers since last year. This marks the first time the underwater population has dropped below 2 million since 2006. So just more interesting, noteworthy things regarding all things homes, all things equity and what you can leverage on a deal where someone might have to not file bankruptcy, just all kinds of things, repayment, payments, just tons of different stuff is happening. And it might feel like the floor is like shifting underneath you. And rest assured, it is. But just do your best to obviously stay on top of them, especially things like the bankruptcy stuff that can absolutely sink a deal. It's the equivalent of staying on top of, say, taxes, so your deal doesn't get sold at a tax sale or something. Just really interesting stuff to stay on top of. And we try to share a ton of this stuff in the weekly newsletter that we do. We try to put 4, kind of interesting, noteworthy pieces in those emails that kind of go out. And one last thing to share is an article from the dallasnews.com, and it's flippers, investors, and builders bought more than a third of Dallas homes in 2016. More than a third of the homes, and this is actually information from Adam Data, and it was shared by Darren Bloomquist, our boy Darren here, was speaking with Dallas News. But essentially, more than a third of the homes sold in Dallas proper, the Metroplex area, was to flippers, investors, and builders.
Jeez Louise.
So we've been talking about prices going up. We've been talking about it being harder to get deals. We've been talking about it on the note side. Like straight up, it's harder on all sides, which is why we have continued to talk about this idea. This is so great. In the article, he actually mentions, he actually references his own data in what I just gave you guys information on the 44,000 homes sold to flippers. And he says, we see the big investors not buying as much. The mom and pop investors are getting more involved and getting in the market a little later in the cycle, which is where we're at, late in the cycle, which is what we're talking about. He said popular cable television shows and investment gurus promote home flipping and investing in rental properties. HGTV makes it look easy, Bloomquist says. I love it. I love how circular this whole bit was. A lot of this show is just about all of the things that can, will, and are happening in the industry, in the business, and how much and how important it is to continue to keep your head about you and do the things like we talk about, not just working in your business, but working on your business. Understanding that you're not probably always just going to be a note investor. And if you are, it's probably not always just going to be firsts. You might want to start doing a couple seconds. You might want to dabble in some CFDs. You might want to take a swing at that really great flip that just came across your plate in your home city. Just knowing all of this information and kind of understanding and getting mature in your real estate business, getting mature in your understanding of what you can and can't do, not knowing what you don't know, and finding and getting those mentors to move forward and growing your business, because all the floor is all shifting, right? Just keep your head above it and pay attention.
Yeah, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket. So that's for sure.
Speaking of eggs all in one basket, a lot of people thought that that's where that frog bit from the beginning originated, is that it was from eggs inside instead of, some people thought it was frozen frogs instead of lobotomized frogs. It's all myths abound, my man. Myths
I
abound.
loved this current events episode. It's been very enlightening, considering I'm not one to really read or watch the news, which admittedly I should get better at. But this has been
funny
good.
you should mention that. Recent data just showed that of people that have 9 to 5 jobs, so this is typical like 8-hour work days, most of those people, large majorities, it's crazy, on average are working I believe it's just under 3 hours a day, like actually working. So if you know somebody who's got an 8-hour a day job, 9 to 5 job, they are typically only working 3 hours a day.
I am not surprised whatsoever. I can't remember who I told, but the other day I'm amazed how anything gets done at this world, or in this world, because I was at, I think, the water company here, because my bill was, just for me, I live alone, it was like $200 for the month, which was insane. And I went there and they're just like, well, let me go check. And they went back and, it took like all of an hour to do this. And at the end of all of it, nothing got resolved. And they're just like, well, check for next month's bill, see if it's not the same. It's just like, my God, nobody ever works.
Well, so what's interesting is you say that, right? That, you kind of keep your head down, you kind of doing your work, doing all that kind of stuff. Totally agree. Except what was interesting is that when they parsed out the other 5 hours, right? You've got like food or like hanging out of the water cooler, coffee, pointless meetings, all this kind of business. Almost an hour of that time, of that additional 5 that people aren't working on a daily basis, almost an hour of that time is spent on news, either through, your Yahoos, your MSNs, if you're into like Drudge Report stuff or CNN or just finding your news on social, Twitter, Facebook, whatever. A crazy amount of time is spent on news gathering, news reading, whatever the case may be. Some of it's like sports news, some of it's world events. Like it just depends on the person, right?
I'm not surprised. I'd say another hour to an hour and a half is spent on Facebook, if not more.
Oh my gosh, that is probably a tremendous number. But my point is that like, you're right. Like paying attention to this stuff is hard. It is that little bit of extra work. You've got to find those spaces that you can do it in line at the grocery store. If you drive a Tesla and you can like autopilot, what, I'm just kidding. Don't do that. But you've got to find time. You've got to find space to be able to do that kind of stuff. Maybe hire a VA to like pull a bunch of these, articles and then truncate it down into bite-sized bits. I think that's a really good idea. I'm going to cut out of the audio now and make a product out of it. I'm just kidding.
or even our friend Adam Adams, which we've had on an episode. I can't remember which one, but I think every morning he dedicates himself to reading an article or something about notes. So yeah,
and then he shares it, and he shares it on social. He shares it on Instagram, on Facebook and LinkedIn. puts it in his emails. The big thing is find the space, find that time to be able to get it done. And I know we're all, I don't have time. I get it. But if out of nowhere bankruptcy law changes and you weren't listening to the Note MBA podcast, episode 133, and you didn't know it.
And then you get freight trained by the news.
And then you get taken to school, right, on December freaking 2nd because the rule changes. I don't actually think it would happen that quickly because of the new. Anyway, you get what I'm saying. In January, you get taken to school because you didn't know the changes were here. That's a problem.
You don't want to be the one caught with your pants down, is what you're saying.
Absolutely, right? So you've got to find that space.
Absolutely.
This has been the first time I believe we've ever really dove in on this kind of stuff. Let us know what your thoughts are on this kind of episode. Either way, me and my family will be recording. Well, they won't be. I can assure you it would be a very entertaining episode to have my daughters on. But I will be in a new place with my family coming next week's show. Potentially next week or the following week. Mr. Woods will be in person. He's making a stop out in Dallas, which is very exciting. So we'll have an in-person episode there. I believe it will be our mid-year's goal episode, which should have happened a couple weeks ago. But, I don't have to tell you. Things have been cray. Either way, David, thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you very much for having me today. All right, man.
Yeah, man. Sharing your insights and drywalling and expensive contractory and all that other business. Though I will say a couple of months ago, I had shared an issue we were having regarding getting some contractors to do some work. And through this week, which led to kind of that back then and kind of is what led to some of these findings that we talked about today, it makes a little more sense. Not a ton, but a little bit more sense on why some of that stuff can be so hard.
Yeah, absolutely, man. It's you go learning day by day a little more.
Indeed. Anyway, if this is your first time here, be sure to head over to iTunes, give us a rating, give us a review, and of course, subscribe. Everything we've talked about today will be in the show notes over at noteMBA.com. As always, remember, tell 5 other people you know this week about the Note MBA podcast. We'll catch you guys next week.
Thanks, everybody.